any subsequent nomination for that position would be moved. However, if it's not approved, then certainly any member can make an additional motion.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, so in that case, motion to or ask for a vote. All in favor for Hannah to be appointed school committee vice chair? Can I see it? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
With 3-2, the motion passes. Consider, discuss, and vote to appoint a school committee secretary.
I move to appoint Megan Gonzalez, School Committee Secretary.
I second. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
No.
Motion passes. Next, item 3 is appoint the subcommittee liaison and committee positions. So I took a look at this prior. We didn't do too much shuffling with this. We'll just go right down the list. 3-1, contract negotiations subcommittee. And Sean, correct me if I'm wrong. I just appoint 2 members, correct?
For the contract negotiation subcommittee in particular, is there 2 member slots for that?
Yeah, so I just don't know, is it like a vote process or is it the chair appoints?
I'm going to refer to the bylaws here. Just give me a moment.
Okay,
We'll get you an answer for that.
no problem.
It says in your bylaws that the chair has the sole responsibility to appoint all liaison and members of subcommittees. At the discretion of the chair, committee members may make nominations of non-school committee members. So yes, you can appoint those positions.
Okay, so for item 3-1, contract negotiation subcommittee, be myself and Hannah. The high school contract negotiation subcommittee will be Michael Rocha and Megan Gonzalez. The policy subcommittee will be Hannah Ayotte and Megan Gonzalez. The Portsmouth School Committee liaison will be myself. The Town Recreation Committee liaison will be Mike Rocha. The Scholarship Subcommittee will be myself and Sue Canane. The Wellness Committee will be Sue Canane. And the School Improvement Team will be Megan Gonzalez. On to section 4.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Michael.
So on that, you referred to the 3.8 on the sit team. Is that what you were saying?
Yes, School Improvement Selection Committee.
So I thought we couldn't be on that. I thought the school committee members couldn't be on that.
Lori?
That person helps designate a community member, non-school affiliation, to be on the SIT team. So it's not the school committee member that's on the SIT team, because that would contravene the statute. It is, per school committee policy, the person who is responsible for identifying a community member who could contribute to the SIT team.
So basically what that's saying is that Megan's going to pick somebody to be on the sit team, just so I understand that
Yep.
correctly.
Correct.
Okay. So who did you have done for scholarship?
Myself and Sue Canane. Anything else we good to move forward? All right,
Move right through that agenda.
perfect. Consent agenda. Is there anything that a member would like to pull from the current consent agenda? I know Michael had some concerns earlier.
I move to take 4.1 from the consent agenda.
Just a matter of procedure. It doesn't need to be a motion to withdraw the 4.1 from the consent agenda if you're going to vote on that. Once you approve the other items, so you're going to simply move to approve 4.1. And just for the new members, just so you understand, the reason why that is being pulled away from the remainder of the consent agenda is because only the members who were actual members and present at the previous meeting can vote to approve that particular set of meeting minutes. It's the only reason why that is being removed and dealt with that way. So Hannah, if I understand, you're moving for approval of 4.1?
Yes.
Can I add to that, please? So 4.4, with that as well.
Four point four enrollment.
Right, there's no attachment. There's nothing here. So we're, again, how do we approve something that there's no documentation to go with it?
Okay, so we'll handle that in a moment, Mike. And I'm sorry, Travis, for
Don't be.
4.1 is the motion. Do we have a, Travis, would you like to call for a second?
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Did you do that?
Is there any discussion? All in favor to remove item 4.1 from the consent agenda? Aye. All opposed? Motion has passed. 4.1 will be removed.
And that was for approval, correct?
For removed or approval?
That was for approval of the minutes?
Approval of the minutes.
So then they can't vote.
Right,
The other two would just abstain.
right.
Okay, so if it's move to approve the minutes with the members that were existing from previous meeting.
Right. So I would just, for clarification, call for the vote again.
Yes, I will.
Make sure.
All right, motion to approve the minutes 4.1 from the previous meeting by the members that were in attendance at the previous meeting.
Aye.
Second? Can we get a second? Is that good?
No, the motion's been made and seconded.
All right, perfect.
Then you just need to call for a vote. I mean, Mike, do you have a problem with the minutes?
I do, because we don't have them. So I'll be voting no on that.
Okay, so in that case then, and I didn't realize that you were going to be voting no, my suggestion is until Mike Rocha can review the minutes, just we'll table it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. Do I should make a motion to table 4.1?
You can,
So-
at the discretion of the chair, can table the minutes.
We will table item 4.1 until all members that were present at the meeting can review the minutes. And then Michael would like 4.4 enrollment pulled from the consent agenda.
Yeah, please, where is the documentation?
Correct. Totally makes sense. So I'll second that. Is there any discussion? All in favor to pull 4.4 enrollment from the consent agenda this evening? Aye. All opposed?
Okay, thank you.
Motion carries. 4.4 is removed from the consent agenda. At this point, Sean, can I approve the 4.2, 3, and 4.5 of the consent agenda?
You can ask for a motion, yes.
All right. Motion to approve the remaining items 4.2, 4.3, and 4.5 of the consent agenda.
So moved.
All in favor?
Nope, you need a second.
Second?
Second, I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. We are on to section 5, the finance report. Mr. John McNamee is here to present
Me.
the numbers.
So last week I met, Tuesday night, I met with the budget committee because the FY '24 budget season has started. The budget committee wanted to meet just to kind of have a discussion relative to what FY '24 might look like. So we did have a little discussion about some of the changes, for example, the new contract for the Portsmouth High School tuition, We talked a little bit about the virtual net metering on the electricity that will have a positive impact on the budget. And we also discussed some various other elements in terms of the existing contracts that are in place, so that as we move forward with the budget, we do have contracts that are in place. So the process will continue. We will be able to present a budget to the school committee sometime in mid-January. We have until March 1st to submit that fully approved by the school committee to the clerk. And by charter, that has to be there by March 1st. Once the budget committee receives it, then we'll meet again with the budget committee to kind of go through the budget. And then the budget committee will make their recommendations, which go to the financial town meeting, which on the, I guess, I don't know if it's the second or third Tuesday in May that we go to the financial town meeting for a vote. So that process has already started on the budget side. The audit will be extended. The auditors are looking for additional time to complete their work. There's a little bit of additional work they have to do on the town side this year. So it looks like we're going to have an extension till January 31st on the audit. Currently, the FY22, I'm not looking at any additional audit adjustments, so we'd be looking at about a $318,000 surplus for the FY22, and you have the kind of background for FY22 in my report, and that hasn't changed since the last meeting. FY23 is looking positive from a budget standpoint. Right now, we're looking at a surplus, which is resulting from the Portsmouth High School tuition being below budget. Initially, we had budgeted 87 students at the high school. We currently have 76. That's a difference of 8 students, but we have 3 more going to Newport Career and Technical. That tuition is $15,500, so there's a net of about 8 students. So that should generate a positive impact on the budget of approximately $100,000, which is where we're standing right now. So there hasn't been anything that's cropped up in the last 5 months that would be unusual. But obviously, you know, things change on a weekly basis. But right now we're tracking towards a surplus of about 100, which is really being generated by that reduction in the Portsmouth tuition.
Beautiful. Any members have any questions for Mr. McNamee?
Good.
All right, section 6, committee reports. We are expecting a report from the Portsmouth School Committee Liaison. And that is Ms. Hannah Ayotte for the final month. She's passing the torch over. I served a little bit of time over there, so I'm not afraid to get back into the trenches.
Yes. So I attended Portsmouth School Committee meeting last night. They were also reorganizing as well. They had the PHS student liaisons come in and give a little talk about what was going on at the high school. Unfortunately, as some of you may know, an English teacher, Miss Karagianis, passed away last week. So they've really been mobilizing around that in terms of students memorializing her within artwork and leaning on each other in their grief. So sending our condolences to the community of Portsmouth and Miss Karagianis's family. They also have Christmas toy drives going on. Winter sports are up and running. Midterms prep is beginning, which those will take place in January. And they gave a little rundown of their AP score data from last year, which out of the 234 students, they had and 400 tests administered, they had about 75% passing. So good turnout on their AP scores this year. It from Portsmouth. Good luck over
Thank
there
you.
at us.
Item 7, discussion items, professional workshop development, school committee policy, procedures, roles, and responsibilities by Mr. Sean Clow.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the school committee. Good evening. Congratulations again to the newly elected members and re-elected member. Hopefully your time here will be productive and you know, however long you choose to serve, or at least up until the next election cycle, you can look back and have some positive memories of what you guys get done here. What I've been asked to do, thank you, is provide a presentation for everyone's benefit, some a refresher, some a primer on what we refer to as School Committee 101. Basically, the general rules of the road as it comes to being a school committee member. So I'll run through that first, just to give you a little bit more of an introduction for me. I am an associate attorney at the law offices of Brennan Recupero, Cascione, Scungio, McAllister. Some of you may be familiar with John Anderson. He is one of the attorneys in the office who has worked here in Little Compton. I work with him as well as others. And we represent you all as a school committee and the entity known as the Little Compton School Department. And what that means in terms of my responsibilities is to advise you as a committee and some of your top employees as to what the rules and regulations are pertaining to education law in the state of Rhode Island, as well as federal law and local law when it's applicable. I do not represent any one of you in an individual capacity, nor do I represent any of the employees in an individual capacity. Again, I represent the board as a whole. Now, sometimes what that may mean is I may give you legal advice when one or more of you may be facing a ethical question that may pertain to a legal question that will impact the school. What do I mean by that is, or impact the school committee? What I mean by that is you all have to follow the code of ethics as public officials. There may be some votes that you take that may conflict with other relationships, associations that you have in your private life. And the law says you can't take those votes. You need to recuse yourself. I certainly am here to advise you as to when you should or should not participate in a particular vote. My nature of giving advice, and all attorneys are a bit different, I try to lay out your options for you. And only if I think under my judgment that it is clear that there's only one path you can take without violating the law, in that moment, I will tell you, this is what you have to do. Now, ultimately, it's your choice. That's the nature of legal advice. You ultimately are the final decision maker on how you comport yourself as a public official and how you comport yourself as a school committee as a whole. But there will be times when we're having discussions and maybe someone decides to bring up a topic very innocently, wants to talk about something that is on the agenda, let's say. Oh, that discussion is out of bounds because it's not posted on the agenda. It's a violation of the Open Meetings Act. The public doesn't have notice that you were going to be discussing this tonight, and we want the public to know what you're going to be discussing. That will be a time where I step in and am more forceful. However, there'll be, hopefully most of the time, you all are in the driver's seat and I can give you advice and you can then render a decision that's in the best interest of the school department and the school kids. Okay. My advice should also remain confidential. That protects the attorney-client privilege. So when I talk to you, perhaps maybe one-on-one, that's a confidential communication. The confidentiality of that communication rests with you. I can't, I'm bound by the law. I can't disclose that to third parties. So what does that mean? I can't go to the Providence Journal and tell them what you've said. I can't go to a member of the public and tell them what you've said to me. That is the attorney-client relationship. That's why often I may refuse to give advice in public session because it breaks that confidence. That's why we have exemptions in the Open Meetings Act where we can go into executive session to have those discussions. Sometimes they may provide you written advice. That's in confidence, typically through email. Obviously, it can stay that way. Of course, if you take it and then post it on the side of your home or publish it in the paper, then it's no longer confidential. You will be privy to a lot of private information, perhaps about students, perhaps about employees. And I'll get more depth in this in the presentation. It's highly recommended that that information stay confidential, and disclosure could be in violation of the law. So moving on from that kind of introduction, if I can. So again, congratulations. You've received the position of school committee, which is slightly a step above dog catcher. So understanding what we're going to talk about here tonight for this presentation, what is your job? What are the powers and responsibilities that you have as a school committee member and as a school committee? Then you got to think about what your goals as a school committee member and as a school committee are going to be. How do your personal goals fit within the committee's goals, fit within the department's goals, and how do you accomplish anything at all? So we'll talk about that. But first, understanding the rules of the game. First, here we have a citation to the Rhode Island Constitution. Article 12, Section 1 vests the duty of the General Assembly to promote schools and libraries. So the General Assembly, due to the fact that the Constitution vests its powers to promote schools and libraries with it, the General Assembly is the one entity in this state that has the authority over education. And as you'll see, the General Assembly has decided to dole out that powers to executive agencies like the Rhode Island Department of Education, which for the new members you'll get to know and love or despise as your time goes on. And then also school committees and superintendents and principals. And that's all laid out by statute adopted by the General Assembly. So as I was saying, school committees are created by the General Assembly. And the school committee's powers are limited by both federal and state law. Federal law could be pertaining anything to civil rights to special education. And state law, likewise, could be dealing with civil rights, special education, different educational standards that the General Assembly adopts. And this number, 493, is the amount of statutes in the state of Rhode Island that mention the phrase or term school committee. And there's over 3,473 Supreme or Superior Court cases in the state of Rhode Island that mention the term school committee. And why I point that out is the last bullet. If you don't like being told what to do, you ran for the wrong position. Let me back up. Part of my bio. In 2012, I was elected to the school committee in Smithfield, Rhode Island. And I served there for 6 years. When I first got on the committee, I thought that school committees were analogous to states and the federal government. The federal government does its thing, but then states kind of can do their own thing over here. And sometimes, yeah, the federal government gets to tell the states what to do, but then there's other areas where the states are off to the races on doing their own thing. And I said, well, yeah, we can be completely different from all these other towns because, well, we're Smithfield. We're our own school committee. I'm elected by the people in my town to implement their version of what school ought to look like. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, that wasn't the case. I was sadly mistaken. There was not a lot of room for a school committee member to implement an entire vision of what, frankly, I thought ought to happen with the school department, because there were so many rules and regulations that we had to follow. Doesn't mean you have no discretion whatsoever. It doesn't mean you don't have a purpose here. You clearly do. But don't be surprised when at the end of the day, it's your hands seem to be tied on a lot of issues that may be important to the community, and you're in a position where you have to explain to the community that you simply just don't have the discretion here. So you're elected to join a committee. Another misconception that I had when first joining the committee is I kind of thought I was like a mini legislator. And I'm gonna go up there and give this wonderful speech about something that and all of a sudden everyone would agree with me, and then we would adopt whatever great idea I had. Well, certainly all of you bring great ideas to the table, but you're elected to join a committee, not a legislature. And that means that you really need to work as a group and through consensus. And in fact, Rhode Island state law, which I don't know if this statute's provided to them in their packets.
I don't think so.
Okay, all right. 1629.1A10, and I'll email you all copies of this after the presentation. But I'll read from the state law. School committees act only through public meetings, since individual board members have no authority to bind the board. Majority vote, in this case 3 out of 5, always prevails. Now, I will tell you, if you're consistently taking votes on a 3 versus 2 basis, there are some serious problems with the inner workings of your school committee. You don't, as a community, don't want to be consistently taking split votes. I've taken votes where I've been in the minority. I've taken votes where it's been unanimous. You have your beliefs, you have your opinions on how things ought to be run. But if you find your committee is constantly taking split votes, that's a sign that there is a problem. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a little while. But your powers come from creating consensus or majority decisions. No one individual committee member can go to a superintendent, an employee, and say, you ought to do this. You need to do that. Completely 100% inappropriate and beyond the bounds of your authority as a school committee member, and in violation of state law. And ultimately, school committee's power is in policy and developing policy, which will guide the superintendent in her administration of the school department. Your committee powers, in a sense, are on loan from the General Assembly. Any day, the members of the General Assembly could wake up and say, we're going to take some powers away. Because you're created by the General Assembly. What they create, they can take away. The Rhode Island Department of Education, likewise, it's created by the General Assembly. Its powers are on loan, and those could be taken back. Now, the Rhode Island Department of Education is charged with developing regulations pertaining to how the state will run its educational system. So that means the development of a basic education program, which details the educational standards and the rights of students throughout the state of Rhode Island, and then passing other regulations, whether it pertains to a school calendar or civil rights, purchasing, things of that nature. And there are other players in this game as well, the superintendent of schools and principals. And the General Assembly, of course, always makes new rules all the time that we then have to, on the fly, figure out what they mean and then implement them. So some statutes. 1629.1, I just read from a part of that. That's the Code of Basic Management Principles and Ethical School Standards. This requires, one, that the school committee adopt a code of basic management principles and ethical school standards, which I believe you have adopted in the past, and it is active policy. And this goes over a lot of what as a school committee, your responsibilities are: formulating written policy, exercising policy making, planning and appraising functions, and delegating administrative functions to the operation of schools. Accepting, encouraging a variety of opinions from and communications with all part of the community. You are an integral part of the little Compton community, and it is encouraged that you take in the opinion of all stakeholders when formulating a decision. You conduct meetings with planned and published agendas. You encourage and promote professional growth of school staff, and so on. I'm not going to read the entire statute to you. And again, I'll provide these all to you.
They're downstairs, the packets.
Oh, okay, good.
Just the statutes.
Okay, good. In this particular statute, I think it's worth acknowledging that you recognize that the first and greatest concern of the school committee must be the educational welfare of the students attending the public schools. That's in statute. That's your guiding star. Now, the entire care, control, and management of the public schools, school interests is vested in you all, the local school committee. Now, although that sounds like expansive powers, the entire care and control and management, that is still within the confines of all the other rules and regulations that you have to follow. You have to implement those federal and state laws, those rules and regulations. And the law does not care whether you agree or disagree on a philosophical level with those rules. They must be implemented, or the school committee will be found to be violating the law. And ultimately, you did take an oath to uphold those laws. A little talk about executive session. You know the adage, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And what happens in executive session should, and hopefully always does, stay in executive session. This is where I said earlier that we learn some items that are confidential, such as legal advice, or there might be a disciplinary issue involving either a student or a teacher or other employee. And that is all protected personal information about that individual who might be before you. That information does not leave the executive session. There's implications for due process rights when statements are made or information is shared outside of executive session. For instance, this doesn't necessarily have to do exactly with confidentiality, but I think it's an important point to understand in your role as a school committee member. Let's take for instance, example. You are told by the superintendent that on the upcoming agenda, there's going to be an issue pertaining to an employee who is alleged to have done something inappropriate. Doesn't really matter what it is. Clearly, it's serious enough to warrant coming towards the school committee. You decide as a school committee member that you're going to be extremely aggressive, and you are going to, before the meeting, decide to conduct your own investigation. If you do that, and let's say you talk to people who know of the individual, you might be hearing rumors through the community. And so that's how you start learning information. Oh, I heard this happened with this teacher. And you start talking to employees, trying to find out what's going on, that's a great way to get yourself recused from that hearing with that teacher. Because if that teacher or that employee finds out, learns, or we all learn that you've conducted your own investigation and that becomes a fact, a part of the record, not only could it create a lot of litigation for the school department, but create a situation where you have to recuse yourself and could find yourself personally being sued for violation of someone's due process rights. And we obviously want to avoid all of that. Your speech and what you say can be an admission in court and result in costly litigation. The case cited there, Alba versus Cranston School District. This is a case that was decided by the Supreme Court in 2013. Part of the issue was an administrator was being let go. And during a meeting, a school committee member made some statements that suggested that the school committee member at the hearing that was scheduled for a later date, deciding essentially the fate of that administrator's employment, they made a statement that suggested they could not keep an open mind and act as a fair arbiter for that person. Well, that person was let go, and then they sued the district saying that the school committee member was biased and should have recused themselves because of a statement they made. You want to avoid this premature investigation. You want to avoid being involved in that because the individual on the other side will say you were biased. And you serve as kind of like a jury when you are deciding whether or not to terminate someone. The superintendent brings forward the facts, says, here's why this person ought to be let go. And then you render a decision. But if you learn something in the meantime and then make a public statement, that will certainly be used against you. Because remember, the person on the other side, they may feel that the superintendent has it wrong. And of course, they're fighting for their livelihood. If you divulge certain confidential information about employees and or students, you and the district can be sued. And when I say you, I mean you personally. And that has happened. And if you violate someone's civil rights, you may be sued personally. And this has happened in a recent decision of a few years old in a Tiverton School District case. Ultimately, it was settled, but they were sued both as school committee members and individually. And this is just a list of different state and federal laws that pertain to student confidentiality. FERPA is the one that we cite most frequently. I see it cited most frequently. That protects students' rights relative to all their records and the privacy with their educational records. So moving on from that, this committee does have overall policy for employment and discipline within the school department, but your superintendent has administrative responsibilities for employment and discipline decisions. So kind of unpacking that a bit and understanding the relationship between the school committee and the superintendent. Another misconception I had when I started out as a school committee member is I thought that since we hire, as a school committee, we hire the superintendent and we can fire the superintendent if we get upset with them, then like we get to dictate all terms and conditions of their employment, including what they do and what they don't do, basically out of whim. Because that's how it works, right? Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, and who you are, that's not the case in this situation. It's a relationship of collaboration based on mutual respect. for each stakeholder's legal duties and responsibilities. So again, back to the General Assembly and the laws that it has passed. The superintendent has statutory duties defined in law that he or she has to follow. And it doesn't really matter what the school committee says. For instance, if the school committee says, we understand you have an obligation to do X because it's written in the law, but we want you to do Y. The superintendent is under no authority, or is under no obligation, rather, to follow that directive from the school committee, because you're asking her to violate the law. Right. So this, again, what I was saying, it's a common but mistaken belief that all the superintendent's authority originates in the school committee. Superintendent does have their own set of powers and responsibilities. This is a list of them. The statutes that you have also detail this. To go through a few that I think are important to appoint principals for each of the public schools at a level of compensation determined in accordance with policies as set by the school committee. To appoint administrators and other personnel not assigned to individual schools. To appoint other employees. To administer the personnel function of the school department, consistent with personnel standards, policies, and a table of organization established by the school committee. So just looking, let's take that last one. The superintendent is going to administer the personnel function of the school department. But she has to do that consistent with personnel standards, policies that you all set. So that's you exercising your care and control over the department, over the district, by establishing those procedures and then making sure you have the oversight to ensure that the superintendent is following those procedures. As I said, the superintendent has an independent duty to comply with federal and state law, as well as local charter provisions, so long as there's no conflict between those three. But if it does contradict school committee directive or policy, local charter, federal and state will trump. And the superintendent is administratively responsible for the operation of the school system, not the school committee. So you, again, are working not in an individual capacity, you are working as a committee. And the superintendent is the one administering the day-to-day operations of the school department. Likewise, principals have statutory duties and responsibilities as well. This is from state law. Principals shall be the educational administrators and managers of their school and shall supervise the operation and management of their school and school property, subject to the supervision and direction of the superintendent. Now, some of you may be familiar with the Educational Reform Act of 2019. At that time, the General Assembly, in its wisdom, decided that it would empower principals with certain statutory rights to manage their particular school building, whatever school building they may have been assigned to. And again, as I just read, it's subject to the supervision of the superintendent. And of course, having to follow school committee adopted policy. So what the General Assembly was trying to do was create the school site-based management system, mirroring it off of Massachusetts. And they established clear expectations for school committees, principals, and school improvement teams. That's where you get the SIT. And the purpose was, particularly with the school improvement teams, was to increase diversity of perspectives for key decisions, budgetary decisions, and it would help facilitate greater buy-in, support, and implementation of initiatives. And obviously the hope was it would promote collaboration across the school district and the LEA, which is the local educational agency. It's synonymous with district or department. So your principals are overseeing the school facilities and equipment. They're preparing their individual school budget. They're recommending the hiring and termination of school personnel within their school building. They're evaluating those employees, and they're developing, in conjunction with the school improvement team, a school improvement plan. Again, this is all from statute. This is not something that you can say, well, we don't really like that, so we're not going to follow that piece or this piece. This is something that we have to, as a school committee, essentially live with. Superintendents, let's see, does that zoom in? Yep. From the 2019 Act, they appoint principals. They appoint administrators and other personnel not assigned to individual schools. And at the recommendation of principals, appoint personnel at individual schools. So the appointment power before the 2019 Act rested with all of you. You had the ultimate for hiring the person. No more. The superintendent hires the individual based, again, on the policies that you develop and on the recommendation of the principal. Unless, of course, it's a position that is not within the confines of the school building. It's an administrative position above the principal. So your unique district, the fact that you have this one school building, but think of a multiple school district scenario, you have a central office staff. They're not assigned to any one particular school. So in that case, there wouldn't be any principal to make a recommendation. And to give you, prior to 2019, you all gave advice and consent on the appointment by the superintendent for all school department personnel. And that has now fully shifted to the superintendents and principals. And that was really to counteract what the General Assembly thought was I know a guy culture. I got a nephew that, yeah, I think he'd be really great in second grade. So let's get him a job. Looking at the budget process, again, under state law, the principals in consultation with the school improvement team prepare a school budget for consideration by the superintendent. Superintendent refines that budget because, again, the principal's looking at their school building. The superintendent is looking at the whole picture. And then the school committee comes in and you review and adopt. You, again, are kind of you're looking at the whole picture, and hopefully you have a good idea of a vision for your school department, not 1 year out, but 5 years out. So you're really looking long-term. That's your role, particularly in the budget process. That's going to dictate what you can do. Hiring and termination. Your school improvement teams assist the principal in recommending the hiring of all school personnel. Your principal, in consultation with the school improvement team, recommends the hiring and termination, and the superintendents approve and appoint personnel. Yeah, we've been over this. School committee, you have the right to employ the superintendent, to establish compensation and personnel policies, and have the overall policy responsibility for employment and discipline of school department personnel. So establishing compensation and personnel policies, I know that the policy subcommittee has worked on a lot of that, looking at compensation. When it comes to the superintendent setting maybe a particular salary, this policy will have guidelines as to what that ought to look like. So now we kind of have an understanding of how you all interact and fit in within this bigger puzzle of education in the state of Rhode Island. Now let's talk about the school committee and its relationship, not only among yourselves, but with the town entity. And there's an interrelationship with other partners in education. The town is your funding source. Yeah, there's a bit of tension from time to time. There is a statutory responsibility to adequately fund education. But of course, what that kind of means in legalese is always as long as it is adequately funded. You know, and you might hope for, well, I don't want to be adequate. I want to be somewhere well above just what is merely adequate. But at the end of the day, the state law only requires that education be adequately funded, which in a lot of sense could mean a town will level fund a school district for several years, which ultimately you get what you pay for in terms of educational outcomes. If you have a situation where a school department is being chronically underfunded, you're going to see less program offerings, less robust programs over time, because costs always go up. It's an unfortunate fact of life. And if you're being level funded, that's over a period of years, that's going to be a problem. You can understand your role in this context as advocates for education. That is, I think, a great way of thinking about how a school committee, particularly ones that are independently elected, such as yourselves, as advocates for the students and education as a whole within the greater town government context. Because your obligation under state law, as reviewed earlier, is the primary North Star is the educational outcomes. You're there in that municipal structure to advocate for those outcomes. And also remember that we have other players other than just the town council or the municipal government. You have your teachers union and other unions that you also will have to work with. And that can sometimes, just like the town side, be seemingly adversarial. And it doesn't have to be. I think it just comes with an understanding that the union has a particular job to perform. And that is protect its members' interests. We need to understand and respect that is their function. That is why they are there. And I think if we understand that, we can work with them, because I don't think any of you are here to adopt policy where you are simply going to hurt teachers or employees for the sake of just hurting teachers or employees. And their interests often overlap with educational interests anyhow. Sometimes it can be compatible, sometimes it's not. That is a reality. And when it's not, or when there is strong disagreement, we try to respectfully work out those differences through negotiation. But often, I think if you have a good relationship with your teachers union, you can find that negotiations and working with them throughout the year can really be a more collaborative as opposed to adversarial function. So just simply respect their position and their advocacy, even if it's at sometimes frustrating, which it can be. So then some warning signs that your committee may be going down the wrong path. You have one or more school board members who continually focus on one issue or talk aimlessly at meetings. Being an advocate for a position is not bad. There's nothing wrong with that. But as a school committee member and as a school district, there is more that you all have to deal with than any one particular issue. So being laser focused on one item even if it's very important to you, does not mean disregard that issue, but it means managing your time and your time as a school committee member to focus on all issues, because all issues that come before you are going to be important to outcomes for school children. Talking aimlessly at meetings, that can also be problematic. You all work during the day. These folks all work during the day. We want to give everyone their due. You have been elected to a position. You want to have the opportunity to speak, but also be conscientious of everyone's time and respectful of that time. A school board member not conducting him or herself in a respectful, collaborative manner in public. I mean, in private too, but certainly we all understand the nature of being in public. And no one wants to be surprised, sidelined in public, embarrassed in public. And if we have school committee members who are engaging in disrespectful conduct, surprising members, surprising school administrators, I even recommend that to the extent that you can, if you have questions about a particular agenda item, ask them beforehand, shoot out an email. Hey, I used to do this a lot as a school committee member. One, because when I would get out in public, I forget all the questions I had, number one. Two, if I got a response ahead of time, I can more thoughtfully think of that response. Maybe I have more follow-up. Of course, there are going to be times where a discussion goes a certain way and you think of a question on the spot, of course, ask it. But again, no one likes to be sidelined either or get caught with a question that they don't have an answer to. And if whether it's a legal question, an educational question, we get those ahead of time. The benefit for you is we can get you an answer, as opposed to if we don't know the answer, well, now are we going to table the vote because you don't have an answer to your question when it could have been asked ahead of time and we could have gotten you the information you needed. So just sort of think of that kind of stuff. Coming to a meeting unprepared. We all live busy lives. I remember doing my homework last minute before a school committee meeting, and sometimes feeling as if I was unprepared. Going through your information, getting your questions prepared ahead of time, asking those questions ahead of time will bring you a long way to having being prepared and having a fruitful discussion at the time of the meeting. School board members micromanaging rather than focusing attention on the district. And I think a great way to look at your role is understanding you are here to set policy for the district, vision for the district over a 5-year time period. You are not investigators of any particular issue. You are not the superintendent, as we like to say. That is not your role. So focus your attention on the district as a whole. Certainly you have questions, again, ask away, but don't start saying, well, I think this superintendent, you need to do this way or that way. One, you don't have the authority to say that. And two, it's micromanaging. You pay somebody, whether it's the principal, whether it's a superintendent, you pay them a significant amount of money to do that job. Pushing a political agenda that has little relevance to school achievement. That is something you want to avoid. Understand, you all won an election. You all clearly are motivated by your values and things that you hold as important for this district. But if they have little relevance to student achievement, this is not the forum for that. And as I've been saying, setting the vision and goals is a great metric for you as a school committee to know if you're being successful. It is a great way to guide your superintendent along a path that you hope that she will go down in order to reach that ultimate vision or goal that you have for the district. Communicating your actions to the community. It's so important that you be transparent and open with the committee about your decisions. One, you're required to, by law, under the Open Meetings Act, host these meetings in public unless it falls under one of the exemptions for executive session. Public discourse, though, having public comment, listening to individuals speaking, taking in those different stakeholder viewpoints, that's what the entire Educational Reform Act was all about. And here it can happen at that school committee level. And working as a team, again, you are a committee, collaborate, be respectful of each other, and of course of the superintendent. It sometimes is difficult to keep your cool when you feel very passionate about something. I've been there. We all, again, come to the table with well thought out values and ideas about what is the right direction to go in for the school district. But sometimes you'll find yourself in the minority side of a vote, meaning you lost the vote. What is your responsibility at that point as a school committee member? Your responsibility at that point as a school committee member is to support what the school committee has done. That is your responsibility as a school committee. It is not the time to then engage in a political back and forth about why the decision was wrong. The decision has been made. We move forward together. Adopting a fiscally sound budget. That's pretty key. I think a lot of people, no matter what town it is, really want to make sure that their school district's money is being spent wisely. So you want to make sure that your budget is fiscally sound. You want to pay attention to the finances, regularly monitor the fiscal health of the district. You get financial reports at every meeting. That is one method of maintaining that attention to finances. Asking questions, coming prepared to meetings to ask those financial questions. I think it takes a very special person to be, an accountant or people who work with numbers.
Good point.
I second that.
So it doesn't come naturally to the rest of us. So ask John all the questions you can is my point. But ultimately focus on what is best for all students. Student achievement, implementing policies that ensure success for all students. Advocate at all levels of government. And take advantage of opportunities to communicate the need of public schools to other levels of government, such as your town council, such as at the General Assembly, so on and so forth. So again, your guiding principle is what is best for students. And your main method of achieving that is policy. I would also say evaluating your superintendent and making sure your superintendent is adhering to policy, making sure you are adopting a fiscally sound budget. Those are the three areas in which you have statutory authority to implement the school committee's vision for this district. So that concludes the school committee 101 and 102 presentation. I think you all have the statutes now in hand. Certainly, you could take a look at those. If you have any questions for me about anything that I just went over, happy to answer anything right now. If I don't have a good answer for it, I'll certainly get back to you. But that is That is what I think is a pretty good overview of your authority as a school committee and what your roles and responsibilities are as a committee as a whole, as well as individual members.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very, very good presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
How many other districts have you
Well,
done?
been a few.
All right, item 8, public input. Is there any public input tonight? I know we have some in the audience. Anyone? No public input. We'll move down to action items. Item 9.1, consider, discuss, and vote to re-adopt the school committee bylaws. We're pulling them up right now. And nothing has changed. We're just re-adopting these bylaws, correct?
So moved.
It's part of the bylaws. You do this at the organization meeting every time there's a new election.
Beautiful. I ask for a motion to re-adopt the school committee bylaws.
So moved. Second.
Are there any questions? All in favor to adopt the bylaws? Aye. All opposed? The motion carries. Item 9.2, consider, discuss, and vote to approve the 2023 Little Compton School Committee schedule of meetings. Not quite as exciting as the Patriots schedule, but something we all look forward to, our Wednesdays. I think that, Lori, wasn't there one day that we talked about changing because of a vacation? Was that April or Feb? What was
It
that?
was April.
April.
And so because so many of you have children who will be on vacation, it would be cruel to schedule a school committee meeting during April vacation when your kids really want you or your grandkids and so forth. So
That was kind.
we did change that. And these aren't carved in stone. If there's any time that one or more of you, that you know you could not create a quorum. These aren't carved in stone, but each time the Secretary of State site needs to be updated.
And I'm assuming good rule of thumb is that as on their second Wednesday
Yes.
of every month.
Of every month.
All right. I'm assuming those dates are all the second Wednesday except for April. Okay.
Yes.
I move to approve the 2023 Little Compton School Committee schedule of meetings. Second.
Beautiful. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? None. Motion carries. Item 9.3, consider, discuss, and vote to approve any requests for information from the administration and or legal counsel. Are there any requests for information from the legal counsel from the committee? Go ahead,
Just got
Michael.
a clarification on that. So, excuse me, the minutes have not been submitted to the Secretary of State for November, right?
And the glitch is being fixed this week. There was a glitch with board docs. Some of us can see those minutes and some cannot. And enrollment is up there now as well. Every now and then, things do get a little quirky, but right, might have to refresh.
I just want to make sure that they haven't been submitted on something that we haven't voted
No,
on.
no, never.
Because if it goes to the next meeting, Sean, maybe you can explain that a draft of them will be prepared.
Right,
But it will say unofficial draft.
right.
And then once you do vote on it, the draft will be replaced by the version that you voted on.
Right.
But
Right.
the body has 30 days to officially submit.
Right, because we are required under state law within a certain time frame to submit minutes.
Yes.
It can't be done within that time frame because the school committee is not meeting to approve those minutes, or for instance, tonight they were tabled because they weren't ready for review. A draft will be submitted to the Secretary of State and will clearly state on that document that it's a draft. And then once you approve those minutes, the final approval document will be submitted to the Secretary of State's site.
Okay.
That's just to ensure we're in compliance with the
It's a
law.
glitch.
So I don't think we need to make a motion though, because what, like you're saying, the draft will be provided next time. We'll have to review those and we'll have to have the vote. So we don't need to. Okay, beautiful. Are there any other questions, concerns, comments for information requests toward the administration or legal?
The conundrum. I wonder if there was an update.
We'll find out.
All right, item 10, consider to vote and adjourn.
There was an update.
I move to adjourn. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Merry Christmas, everyone.